What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 3 of Point Kentucky. My name is Hunter Mitchell, and I am once again joined by my co host, Leah Edmond. How are you today, Leah?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm great. We had two losses last weekend by the Cats, but we're going to power through. Still having a good week anyway. We'll preview this weekend. First, we are going to recap those two matches against Pittsburgh. Cats showed some flashes of a few good things, but unfortunately weren't able to pull out a win either at home or on the road with Pitt. Leah, we'll kind of obviously break this down in detail, but just kind of your initial thoughts on watching both the game at Rupp and then which you were in person at and then the one in Pittsburgh. What was kind of your first initial takeaway from the Cats 2 games this weekend?
It was kind of like it was a mix because there were like so many like little good flashes that you're like, oh yeah, if we do that in a couple more points and you'd be set. It was just kind of a lot of like once you got to a point where you're about to make a run, then making a not great error or a dumb
Mhm.
error or overthinking something or making something way more complicated than it needed to be is kind of what I kept seeing was because there wasn't that many times where like in the beginning they really didn't like go out like 10-1. It was kind of back and forth, maybe 2 to 3 points, and that's a very easy change in volleyball to make. So 2 to 3 points in volleyball is not that big of a deal. It's just when they got close to like getting that, something like just error wise, technique wise, would just like go to ruin. So like they're on a good serving run, and then someone make a hitting error or someone make a blocking error, which you really can't have any control over. But like little things that like mentally you want to be there for, kind of went out the door.
And I think if we talk about just that first home game when they played Pitt the first time at Rupp, you could tell that there was a lot of nervous energy for that.
Mhm.
Obviously, talking about breaking the attendance record, and I mean we didn't break the attendance record this year, but they had, I think it was like over 5,700 people in that first game at Rupp. So fans were there and people were excited to see the first really marquee opponent for Kentucky of the year, and this is a Pitt team that obviously made the Final Four last year and the year before, and they lost to five in Louisville last year in that Final Four. So a lot of expectation just for playing a team like that. And I think that first set, they got beat pretty badly. Kentucky did in that first one. I think a lot of that you can kind of tell was just, antsy and ready to go and the buzz in the air. And they settled in to their credit the next two sets. But, you kind of touched on it. Again, this has been a very common theme for this team early here in these first four matches. Errors are killing them. And I think that's kind of, for me, was the biggest takeaway, watching that game at Rupp. It just, like you mentioned, every time it felt like the crowd was behind him and they were there and ready to really make one of those little mini runs, as Craig likes to say. You need about 2 or 3 mini runs of like 3 points a set if you really want to take it. That's kind of what Craig usually tells us in the post game. And it felt like every time they were about to make one of those, they'd hit the ball into the net, or they'd have a ball handling error, or they hit the ball out of bounds, or another service error. And those are the little things that you kind of hit on there that really, I think, took away a lot of that momentum, especially in that second and third set. Is it felt like, look, we watched Pitt play Kentucky twice this weekend. I don't know about you. I didn't feel like ever when I was watching that Pitt was some kind of behemoth Wisconsin or Texas. It never felt
Mhm.
like Pitt was just strictly outclassing Kentucky. A lot of times it felt like Kentucky was just beating itself. And I think that's kind of been a common strand for this team. It's one of those things where you can look at it positively and say, hey, it's not like you're just being beat down by everybody. You're beating yourself. But you can also look at it and say, hey, you're beating yourself. How do you stop that? So why don't we start there first, Leah? Two matches against Pitt, the game against Colorado State. The biggest thing that I have seen has been errors. Kentucky is
Mhm.
giving hitting errors and giving service errors to the other team. Pittsburgh is a big team, or a big physical team. As an outside hitter, you played for Kentucky, obviously playing professional. When you're playing a team like Pitt that has one of those big physical blocks, what can you do as an outside hitter to attack a block like that? Because I think, again, if you don't know volleyball, you might see a block in front of you and say, oh, how do you get around that? It's already there.
Mhm.
But there are ways to attack a block where you can still be successful. And I think that's one of the things, at least I've been noticing here early, that Kentucky isn't yet figured out how to do.
Yeah. I mean, Kentucky's already running a really fast offense, which sometimes there's going to be miscues on that. So that's going to be normal with any type of fast offense, but that's having a high volleyball IQ. So knowing you have a big block when you can't pull down. Everybody wants to bounce a ball, but when you have a bigger team, you can't bounce balls. Like that's just not going to happen unless you
Yeah.
have an open net. So it's aiming for those fingertips, aiming for those pinkies and middle fingers hanging up there. It's going high and around, but it's also being really smart with your shots. Now they have a back row setter, and something that I saw a lot was a lot of the free balls, down balls, kind of like little shots that weren't hard swings were not going to right back. And when you have a back row setter, that's where you want to send the ball, because if the setter takes that first ball, then you're out of system. So that already takes out your middle. You're left with two offensive options, and then it opens the floor up. So just more high volleyball IQ in those type of senses. You have to know where people are on the court and knowing where the best place to put the ball is when you know you're not going to get a big swing. And at the same time, as an outside, you're going to get at least 20, 30, maybe even 40 swings a game. So it's also still having that confidence and fearlessness of being like, okay, I might have a big block in front of me, but I can't change how I'm playing. I can't change what I'm doing because there's a big block. You got to go up there. You're going to take the majority of the swings. You got to be ready to swing. You can't take shots. And when the games are close, or when you feel like things are going wrong, that's the last time that you want to try to pull back. You want to still go for it. And so there were a lot of times where, like, I was hitting the stand and I was like, swing, and they'd hit a shot, and I was like, no, that's the time where you're supposed to swing. Like, you just got to go for it at that point, especially when you're already down. The last thing you want to think of is, I don't want to make errors. That's the time where you're like, you know what? At this point, I got nothing to lose. Why not go for it? Because sometimes that catches a team off guard. I know sometimes when I saw teams doing terribly against me, I'm like, oh yeah, they're gonna just start hitting shots because they don't want it. They're afraid of the block, and that's, you want to do the opposite of that. You want to keep going after it. You want to keep pushing to keep them on their toes. Like, the game isn't over.
Leah, you mentioned out of system there. And again, I think if you aren't familiar with volleyball, that's one of those phrases that you hear a lot. You might not necessarily know what it means, but if you win the out of system game more often than not, you're going to find yourself on the winning side of the scoreboard. So, can you break down for those of us watching, what exactly do you mean when you say a team is out of system?
So basically, when the setter is not setting the ball. So we call that in system when the setter is able to run normal tempo. So if you are a fast offense, if that setter has the ball in her hands, she's in a position where she can still set you the expected ball. So think as ball is perfect on her head, that's in system. You can run whatever you want, do whatever you want, and it's really hard to defend. So out of system is when basically the setter takes that first ball, which we don't want her to do, and somebody else has to set the ball. And 9 out of 10 times, it's not going to be tempo. It's going to be that high, like, loopy ball that you see going to one of the pins. And so a big thing for teams when you have a team that runs a 6-2 is getting that ball to that setter, making her play a ton of defense, because then she is on, she's playing defense a lot, and other people have to set the ball, which is exactly what you want.
And we kind of teased that a little bit before that match, Leah, about how important it was to get a Pittsburgh team that runs a 6-2 out of system, because if you don't, they are going to have three, sometimes four, if you count their back row attacker, options offensively available at all times. And in that game at Rupp, you saw that a lot. Kentucky did not do a great job of getting Pitt out of system, both just in transition when they were trying to get the ball over the net, but also from the serve receive line. Felt like Pitt was in system the entire match, and they really could do whatever they wanted with Kentucky. And Kentucky just couldn't set up a defense to actually stop them. The interesting thing to me, though, from again watching those matches, was we've talked about it for years. Kentucky's calling card recently has been how good they are offensively. Statistically, one of the top 5, top 10 teams in the country from an efficiency standpoint. We have not seen that this year. When I look at a box score, and again, this is referencing that Friday night match against Pitt, if I see a game where Emma Grome has 24 assists through 3 sets of play, I know Kentucky did not play well offensively. Because Emma is, again, what Emma has done in the spotlight, the hole left by Madison Lilly, who I think most would argue is the greatest setter to ever play at Kentucky, maybe one of the best collegiate setters ever, or at least in recent memory. What she has done at Kentucky in Lilly's absence has been remarkable. She is a phenomenal setter for Kentucky. I still think Kentucky has one of the best setters in the country, with Grome leading the team. If she finishes a match with 24 assists, that tells me your offense was struggling. And we look again at the efficiency for that match. Kentucky hit 084 for that one and had no player with more than 7 kills, and that was Reagan Rutherford. And Reagan had 7 kills but 6 errors. I mean, Kentucky could generate nothing offensively. It felt, again, like that block from Pitt really, really bothered them. And rather than, again, we've talked about this, Leah, when you played for Kentucky, when you saw blocks, obviously you played Florida a lot, right? A perennial blocking team in the SEC. Florida did not scare you. And the thing about when you played at Kentucky, Florida knew Leah Edmond is going to get most of the balls. It didn't matter. Florida could not stop you because you knew how to attack that block. They could throw a 6-8 block at you. Didn't matter. You knew how to tool it off the hands and get it to go out of bounds. That's something that we're still waiting for people like Brooklyn DeLay, obviously, a freshman, still waiting for her to figure out. Erin Lamb, again, she has shown flashes of how good she is becoming, and she's shown flashes of using the block. But again, sometimes if errors pile up early, she has a tendency to, unfortunately, revert to that. We're still waiting to see Kentucky's left pin figure out how to use how to use that block to their advantage. And I think again, when you look at these two matches against Pitt, Kentucky got next to nothing out of the left pin, and you are not going to win a volleyball match without getting at least something from your left side. Reagan can give you 19 kills like she did on Sunday against Pittsburgh. That's great. Elise can give you 12 out of the middle. That's great. But if you aren't generating anything from your left pin, it's going to be hard to generate any kind of consistent offense because so many of those balls, especially out of system, are going to that left pin because it's just easier to set. So Kentucky, again, I think we both agree this is not necessarily a problem of they don't have the horses this year. Kentucky isn't talented enough. When Ajani Teeler came on this podcast last week and said this is one of the most athletic teams that I've played with at Kentucky, she wasn't lying. That wasn't team speak. That wasn't coach speak, whatever you want to call it. This is a Kentucky team that is very athletic. When you have people like Ajani Teeler and Reagan Rutherford and Jordan Williams, these are athletic, physical players. It's not a problem of do they have the talent? Do they have the depth? Do they have the defensive specialists? We've seen all of that for Kentucky. The problem right now is they are beating themselves by killing any and all of their momentum by trying to do too much. You are going to score 1 point per play. There's no 4-point play in volleyball. There's not a 3-pointer that you can hit. You are never going to catch up more than 1 point at a time. And at times it feels like Kentucky, if they fall down by 3 or 4, they're trying to get it all back at once, and you're never going to get that way. Again, what was the problem against Colorado State? No blocking. Kentucky actually blocked pretty well against Pitt. For a team like Pitt that obviously is large and physical and is perennially known as being a really physical blocking team over the last several years, I thought they competed toe to toe with them. And, we've seen what Jordan Williams can give Kentucky from a blocking standpoint out of the middle. And we know that Reagan Rutherford is one of Kentucky's better blockers. And I thought Brooklyn and Aaron had good blocking games. I mean, I thought defensively Kentucky was good enough to beat Pitt. It wasn't like Pitt came out and hit 400 on them both matches. They didn't. They hit below 300 in both matches. The problem, again, is just if you can clean up errors and stop gifting so many points to these teams, I think you're going to have a lot more success. And if you look at, again, that match on Sunday, Kentucky had 29 hitting errors and 15 service errors. You gave Pittsburgh 44 points. I mean, that's an astounding number. And all of those sets, except for one, were close. I mean, when you look at the set scores, it wasn't like, now, there was one set where Pitt blew them out. But outside of that, those other 3, Kentucky was right there. If you take 2 hitting errors away and you turn them into kills, that's a 4-point swing that very well could have won you the set and completely changed the course of that match. This is what we mean, again, when we say you're beating yourself, and if you can find a way to clean some of that up, you're going to be a lot more successful against some of these teams that, again, when you play a team like Pitt, top 10 team, you can't do that. There's minimal room for error, especially on the road. You're going to Pitt. That kind of stuff you have to figure out. And especially, Lee, as we look ahead to what they have coming up, you're playing a ranked Houston team tomorrow. You're playing either a ranked Purdue team on Saturday or an SMU team that just beat number 14 Baylor in 5 last night. Then you're playing Louisville next Wednesday, who's obviously ranked number 2 in the country, and you're playing them at Louisville. Those are the things that when you look at this upcoming schedule, if you can just cut down on your errors, you're going to give yourself a chance. Because like we said, you've got the depth, you've got the offense, you've got the hitters, you just got to figure it out. And I think when you kind of look at what you've got going forward, obviously there is reason to be concerned and there are things that you have to clean up. But I do think there's some optimism going forward.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing, this is the good thing about preseason or non-conference is you're getting all this stuff out. It sucks to lose. I mean, I was talking to you about it before. My junior year, we were the number 4 team in the nation and we went out 0-3. And we were all just very, very confused. But then we ended up being undefeated the entire SEC season. And so this is what you want because, I mean, this counts, but SEC counts just a little bit more because you need that automatic bid to get in the tournament. And so this is where you work out the kinks. And the crazy thing about it is we haven't seen a solid lineup yet. It's a constant rotating door. I mean, Z played on Friday, doesn't play on Sunday. So it's just, and you had outsides that played on Friday that were revolving door on Sunday. And so that's the beauty of the team of they have so much depth, which means that there is opportunity for someone. And that's the point. Someone from each position group has to just step up and be like, nope, I'm going to take this spot and I'm going to earn this spot by how I play on the court. And from a volleyball standpoint, from someone who plays volleyball, you can tell when something's volleyball related, when you're like, just their passing's off or they just don't have the offensive power. And it's none of that. It's just mentally, how locked am I going to be in this game? How much am I going to push what am I going to do to make sure we're getting 2 3 points in a row? Because I mean, serving's one of those things where no one else has any say on it but you do. So having 15 serving errors is completely up to that one person. It has nothing to do. There's no one else touching the ball but you. So things like that, like little things like how can I focus more on serving so that you don't have 15 serving errors going into this weekend. But I think just in the grand scheme of things, they just kind of have to ride it out. And it sucks as a fan to see your team lose because you don't want to see them lose, but sometimes this is what you need in order to get exactly what you want going into the preseason. So I think this weekend is a really good test to see how can we push? What can we do to make sure that going into these next couple of weeks of it's getting harder, what are we going to do to make a difference?
Leah, you mentioned that season where you all started 0-3. I think you all even then went 1-4. So kind of a similar position that Kentucky's in right now. What's the confidence level look like for that locker room right now? I mean, when you're playing teams and you're close, you're right there, but you can't quite
Mm-hmm.
get over the hump. What's your confidence level looking like, especially as again you look at the schedule coming up and you see ranked Louisville and ranked Houston and ranked Purdue and ranked Nebraska? I mean, what are you looking at mentally in the locker room?
I mean, you're hoping that everyone has hope, but if you're being honest, you're just kind of like in the middle. Like sometimes you might have people in the locker room that are like, I hope we can just pull out a win. I hope. And then you have others that are like, I don't have any confidence. And then you might have some that are like, nah, we can do this. And so it's a really hard place to be. So as a team, you really have to lock in and be like, we got to take this one game at a time. So right now they got to focus on tomorrow's game. What can they do to be good for tomorrow's game and then pushing forward? Because I think if you get too far ahead of, oh my gosh, or start thinking about what you did behind, like, oh my gosh, this person played like this. I don't know what I'm going to get from them tomorrow. Like you can't think of that. It has to be a clean slate now. Because if you keep thinking about what they did against Pitt, what they did against Colorado State, they're never going to get out this hump because they're going to be constantly thinking about all the errors. But I mean, the big thing I want to see is just someone take over the game, just someone go out there and be like, you know what? I don't like how this is going. I want to see a change. And I know we saw a lot of that in my 4 years here. You could tell when
Yep.
someone on the court just took charge and was like, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to win this game as much as I can. I'm waiting for someone to do that. And we've seen Z do it before, but it's so hard in her position to take over a game when you're only on the court for 3 rotations.
Yep.
So she only gets maybe 3 chances, not even if it's a quick rotation, to try to make an impact. So I'm ready to see someone else step up and be like, you know what? I'm going to be a difference maker. And especially from those outside, I want to see just so much more production from them because we know what they're capable of. We saw in that exhibition against Western how efficient and well they can play. I want them to have the confidence of like, I'm bigger on campus. I'm going to take over this game because I'm going to get the majority of the balls anyway.
And again, like you mentioned that Western exhibition, how good Brooklyn and Aaron were. And again, if you kind of looking at what's happened at the beginning of the season, you might be thinking like, where did that go? Why all of a sudden are we having so many issues on that left pin? We talked about it before. When you don't have a good pass and serve receive, the block is expecting you to go to that left pin. I think
Yeah.
what we've seen lately a lot is unfortunately Emma and Brooklyn. Emma has no option, and so she's having to set it to them, and they haven't been given room to score. We know one thing that I love about Erin, even in these last few matches that she's played in, Erin is still not afraid to swing. She might have
Yeah.
errors, but she is still going to swing at the ball. She is one player that is not afraid to swing and try and get a kill. Now, sometimes that results in roofs, and that's where you got to figure out how to tool the block a little bit better. But the one thing about Erin is that she is consistently taking a rip at the ball. And that's what you've mentioned. Kentucky needs a dog that just says, all right, give me the ball and I'm going to go get a kill. I'm sick of the run. I'm sick of them getting points running off on us. I'm going to figure out a way to end this. And that's what I think, again, Kentucky's got to find a way to figure out. You don't have a lot of room. You don't have a lot of room for error in this non conference because so many games are on the road and they're against ranked teams. But this is a good weekend where you're not, look, Purdue, SMU, Houston, they are good teams. By no means am I saying this is some kind of gimme weekend, but you're not playing Wisconsin this weekend, right? You're playing teams that, while they're still good, they're still ranked, they're probably going to be in the tournament. All of that's still true. You have a very good opportunity to say, all right, let's go out there, and if we don't beat ourselves, let's see how good we can be. We saw in that game against Western, against a team that started the season ranked. This Kentucky team's got some really efficient hitters and some really good, really great horses, and they're deep. All of that is still true about this team. Right now, they've got to figure out a way to stop beating themselves. Leah, you played in a lot of these tournaments. That's where
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky's going this weekend is, one of these tournaments with a bunch of teams. What's the mindset going into a tournament when you're obviously playing multiple matches in, 1 or 2 days? They play tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon against Houston, and then if they lose, they would play Friday or Saturday morning against either SMU or Purdue, and if they win, they'll play one of those teams Saturday night. So what's kind of the mindset going into one of these tournaments where you're playing so many games in a very little amount of time?
You have to have a very, very short memory. Very short memory because you play a game, you're locked in for that game, however long it is, and then you get ready for the next one. And it's really a mindset of, okay, I'm going to go hard for this one. Then I need to make sure I'm recovering and putting myself in the best position to win this next game. And I think that's really hard about playing these multi-day tournaments is there is no recovery time. So by the time Saturday hits, all these teams are going to be extremely tired, especially because you don't know if you're going to go to 3, 4, or 5 sets. So
Yep.
you might play 3, 5 setters in a row. And I mean, that's not what you want, but you can't really kind of you can't put a timeline or know what's going to happen in the game. So it's really just, I need to be able to focus for whatever long period of time. I need to put myself in the position that I'm ready as I am today, as fresh as I am on Friday, and being ready for that next game. So, I mean, it's a hard thing, but it gets you ready for tournament time because tournament time, there's a lot of quick turnaround with knowing teams and knowing rotations. And now you really have to be especially disciplined because you're getting so much information in a short amount of time. So I'm finishing my game Friday night. I have to be ready Saturday morning to play a team, know their scheme, know what I'm supposed to be doing, and still do my job at the same time. So it can be a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, but that's what builds such great tournament teams because you have to be ready. The best teams are the ones who can efficiently make it through these types of weekends and be able to push and still play their school volleyball without letting all the other factors get in the way.
Leah, what's that look like for an outside hitter? Obviously, you're getting the majority of the balls, especially if they're garbage balls and they're just going to the left pin. You're playing multiple games in one tournament. What's it like just from a fact of your shoulder? I mean, you're getting 40 swings a match, and you're playing Friday night, and then you're playing again Saturday morning or Saturday night. What's it look like just from a what's it do to your body? I guess. I mean, that's a lot of swings on one arm.
It can be stressful, and I definitely remember Craig being absolutely honest to make sure we were doing everything recovery-wise, and they definitely put in their schedule to make sure there's recovery time, but I think it's even more of a mental strain than it is physical sometimes because as an outside hitter, you're getting the majority of the balls. By the end of this weekend, all these teams have seen you play at least 2 other teams before you got to them,
Hmm.
if that's how it turns out, so they know exactly what you're gonna do. So they're going to know your tendencies. They already are going in knowing your tendencies, but now they're going to know them even more because how you played last weekend might not be how you're playing this weekend. So last
Right.
weekend, your tendency might have been all line shots, and this weekend it's angle. So they're going to have to lock that on you. So mentally, you have to be prepared for teams to know your exact move and everything that you're doing because you're sitting there playing in front of their face the entire weekend. So it's being able to again recover, reset, short memory from the game before because I might have had a bad game last night, but this morning I have to be ready to play a new one. And you don't have time to be worried about how you played the last game. You have to be worried about this one. And so that's the challenge is how short of a memory can I have depending on what happens. If I lose tomorrow night, how am I going to recover for Saturday morning? Am I going to still be sulking about that loss, being mad about little things that happen, or am I going to reset my brain to be ready for this next game? So what happened last night doesn't happen again this night.
This is a good barometer, I think, for Kentucky from that standpoint. Again, we talked about how the left pin right now is kind of an area of issue for Kentucky. Again, not because of the talent, just because of consistency and maybe it's confidence, whatever you want to say. I think this is a really good opportunity for Aaron and Brooklyn and even Megan Wilson. Let's see if you can put some of those mental errors that have been plaguing you for the last several weekends, put those to rest. This is going to be a good chance again against teams that are good, and they're going to be a very good, possible resume builder if you're able to pull off some wins here. But that's, I think, going to be a really interesting thing. Look, Reagan's been great all year long. We've seen Reagan Rutherford
Mhm.
play well. She's had a few too many errors in some of these matches, but in that most recent match against Pitt, she hit 357, finished with 19 kills. You'll take that from a right side attacker all day long.
Yeah.
We've seen Elise Getzinger come in off the bench, and she's been phenomenal. So again, he even benched Ajani in that match against Pitt, that second match against Pittsburgh, which we haven't seen from Kentucky for a while. So we have seen some really solid play from the veterans for Kentucky, kind of the staples for Kentucky over the last several years. Look, Aaron played last year, but that was her first. Last year was her first time playing consistently for Kentucky.
Mhm.
Obviously, Brooklyn is a freshman this year, so these are some younger hitters for Kentucky that are, I think, having to figure some of this out for one of the first times. And even last year, when Aaron was playing consistently, you had a graduate transfer in Adana Rollins that had seen so much action playing for Minnesota and playing for Penn State. Like she was a really experienced hitter. They weren't really leaning on Aaron as the primary, offensive option on that left side. This year they are. This year they're looking to Aaron Lamb to be the leader as that junior on the left, and really expecting a lot more out of her. So I think this is going to be a great weekend, especially for those two, just to kind of see where they're at. Can they get over some of those mental hurdles? Again, we've talked about how great Brooklyn DeLay is. I think she's, as a freshman, having to work some stuff out, and I don't think that this is any kind of indictment on her talent. I still think that she's
Mm-mm.
going to have a phenomenal career at Kentucky, and the stuff that she's shown has been great. I just think that when you play a Pitt team on the road and at home, and it's your third or fourth match in a collegiate volleyball uniform, it just takes some adjusting to get used to it. And hopefully now she knows what it's like to play a ranked team and play them on the road. And now you can, kind of dust that off a little bit and
Mm.
go into these matches this weekend and say, all right, I know what it's like now. Settle those nerves. Let's just get to it. So this weekend's a great opportunity for Kentucky, but next Wednesday is the really big one. That's the one that I think a lot of people are kind of turning their attention to. Leah, you did this a lot. You were undefeated against Louisville in your career at Kentucky. When you have one of these tournaments before that rivalry game in the middle of the week, how do you stay focused on who's in front of you and not pay attention to, man, we have the big one, the Louisville one. You're from Kentucky, so it's a little different for you. But
Yeah.
how do you stay focused on who's in front of you and not pay attention to the fact that you've got Louisville on Wednesday?
It's hard. I would be completely honest. It is so hard because that's like one of the ones that you look forward to for every sport, and so you know what comes with that. And especially playing in Louisville, you already know what comes with that. It's a little bit more hostile, and so I think it's really right now they gotta focus on this weekend. Like Louisville, like in the back of your mind, like you know that's the exciting one coming up, and I know in their head they definitely want to avenge the past couple of years of not winning and being so close. So I think it's just really hard for them, and I know it is because it was hard for me too to want to focus on the game in front of you because you know that one's the one that everybody's waiting for, and that's the one that you know is going to get a ton of fans, a ton of just overall notoriety because it's Kentucky versus Louisville and how big Louisville has become in the past couple of years volleyball wise. So I can't even hurt on them if they are focusing just a little bit on it because it's just hard not to, and that's the same with Louisville. I know you know that game's coming up, and that's one of the ones you always have marked on your calendar because it always comes in the middle of September around the same time. So it's hard for both. I know it's probably hard for both teams to focus, but I'm telling both of them they need to focus this weekend, and then they can worry about that game. Especially it being on a Wednesday, they're not going to have a bunch of time to recover and focus and practice. So definitely got to get through this weekend first, but also be very excited because you want to go into Louisville with a couple wins under your belt just to have that confidence that you need.
Right, especially going to that rivalry match. And like I
Mm-hmm.
said, Louisville is ranked second in the country right now, so that's going to be a big match from a ranking standpoint, regardless of what happens this weekend. So, Cats are definitely going to have to focus in on what they've got directly in front of them. But that rivalry game is certainly looming. A lot of people in Louisville are excited for it. A lot of people in Lexington are excited for it. So it's going to be a fun night of volleyball, in Louisville. But you got to get past this weekend first. Well,
Yeah.
we've touched on the left pin, especially a little bit on the middles and acing it with Leah tonight. Leah, why don't you break down for us what's typically expected out of each of those positions? Because again, if you aren't familiar with volleyball, I think it's one of those things where you might see, well, how many kills is actually normal? We know, we look at football or basketball, you can kind of see what a good average for each position is. But why don't we talk about that from a volleyball standpoint?
So yeah, so outsides, like we said, get the majority of the ball. So that can range from 20 balls a game to 40, 50, 60. It depends on your team. I mean, at Kentucky, I averaged around 30 to 40 balls a game, which is it's about normal for any outside because you are getting the junk ball. So any ball that, like I said, is not in system, not on top of the setter's head, or the setter's not able to run an offense, you're getting that ball. So you want to average around maybe 3 to 4 kills a set
Hmm.
is about a nice average for an outside. You'll have a couple that average 5 to 6, and those are usually teams that are literally using just their outside. You won't really see that with a bunch of the higher level top 10, top 25 teams of having an outside that has 5 to 6 kills. So you're looking at 3 to 4 kills, maybe around 10. Most outsides should be double digits in kills majority of the nights between that 10 and 20 range. Of course, you have your outliers that will be up in the 20s, depending on the game. But that's what you're kind of looking for. Depending on the outside's role, you don't know what you're averaging when it comes to other positions, but you should at least be getting 1 to 2 blocks a game. That's a relative thing because blocking really doesn't have any like you're not controlling the blocking. You're hoping somebody hits in your hands. So you're looking at that. I mean, a double double, 10 kills, 10 pat digs is not a outlier for outsides. What a lot of outsides do play 6 rotations. Right now, none of the outsides from Kentucky are playing 6 rotations, which is kind of probably nice for what's going on right now. They can focus just on their front row attack with hitting and blocking. And I mean, we have Brooklyn. She serves. Aces are relative. If you get one ace a game, that's fine and dandy. There are plenty of games that I've had that I did not get a single ace. You would not see it at all. It just kind of depends on if you're hitting it. But yeah, around and outside, I mean, we want to look at maybe percentage wise. You want, and if an outside's over 300, they're having a phenomenal game.
Yep,
I mean,
very good.
with how many balls that you're getting, you are destined to make an error. You don't want to say it, but you're definitely going to make some errors because you're sometimes getting some crazy balls that are just thrown up in the air and you're expected to make a point. So 300, really high. One, but you don't want to be in those 100s. Definitely 200 to 300 range is probably perfect for an outside. You have outsides that hit 400 and have really big, nice games, but 200s, if you see 200, 250, the thing at 253 range is a really good, nice range for like a normal 3-set match for an outside. But I mean, of course, you're going to have those outliers who are putting up crazy numbers, crazy percentages.
She's referencing that Florida match, everyone, where she had 30 kills and hit like 400 against Florida in that 5-star. That's what she's referencing in terms of the
I don't
crazy
think
match.
I will ever be that efficient ever again in my life. I'm gonna be completely honest because sometimes I'm like, how was that ball in? I really don't know. But yeah, I mean, I had my own games where I was like, I hit 400. You're crazy. No way. There's no way. But I mean, if you can have a really efficient outside, that's really nice too. Low error outsides really make everybody's job a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
And then going to the middle, they only get 3 rotations. So there's a little bit more of a look at perfection coming from middles. You don't want to see middles having high error, especially because they're not getting a bunch of touches. It really ranges when it comes to middles and kills. I mean, you can have some middles that might get 5 kills a game, but that might be a very helpful 5. And then I've played with middles, of course, here, like Leah Meyer and Kaz Brown and Emily Franklin, who will put up the double-digit kills in a game and do it consistently. So for middles, it's not really about the kills. It's more about the efficiency. You want to see them making low error because their balls are so quick, because most of the time they have little to no block. So there's kind of like no reason why they're not playing cleanly. Middles, you kind of want to see them in that 300 range. That's very normal for a middle to be in a 300 range because you might have a middle only get 10 balls in a game. So you're hoping that they're getting at least 5 kills on those 10 balls. That might be a little high, but I know in Kentucky's gym, they're definitely expecting high efficiency from the middles. Blocking wise, middles, you definitely want to see them have as many blocks as they can get. Having a 5-block game is not out of the cards for a middle. That's kind of normal. That's what you want to see from your middle. You want to see your middle having those blocks too, because they are the ones setting up that defense. So for middles, you want to see high efficiency, low error, kind of keeping the ball even in play or getting a bunch of kills because they have such a low range of balls that they're touching. They can get anywhere from 10 and maybe 20 balls. You might get a middle that has more than that, but it's very, very rare unless they're like a Z who runs normal high balls to the pins as well. And same with right sides. Right sides, you kind of want to see a little bit more efficiency from them because you're not really throwing them those kind of crazy out of system balls. Most of the time they're in system. So you're looking for them to have a little bit higher of an efficiency than an outside, but not that crazy 300, 400 that you're expecting from a middle because they still are on a pin and they still have a high room for error because they're on those pins. But for the most part, I mean, it just kind of depends on your team. I mean, there's baselines that you want to see. And like when it comes to All-American at the end of the season, there are expectations of most of those numbers that you need to be seeing an outside, middle, or right side having those high of numbers before they even get a chance to be considered. So just a thing to keep in mind. I mean, I've definitely played with outsides in the SEC who average 5, 6 kills set, and we're putting up outrageous numbers. And I mean, kudos to them because my arm was hurting and I had help, so I can't even imagine what it was like for them. But yeah,
Leah,
I mean,
we'll kind of look at what you talked about, even just from the most recent match against Pittsburgh. So you talked about how often middles don't get a lot of swings. Some of them are more defensive minded, some are more offensive minded. I think Kentucky's a great example of that this year.
Mm-hmm.
Elise Getzinger is a very offensive minded middle for Kentucky. Like
Yes.
in the most recent match against Pittsburgh, she had 30 attempts. Kentucky went to her often, which again, for a middle, that's a lot of swings. I mean, that means they were
Mm-hmm.
going to that slide, running off one foot that she loves to do pretty often. So she had 12 kills, only 5 errors, hit 233. So she's more of Kentucky's offensive minded. Jordan Williams is more of the defensive minded, right? Craig
Mm-hmm.
loves and talks all the time about how good she is at the net from a physicality standpoint, both in terms of blocking balls straight down, but even just getting block touches and slowing down the ball for the defense. She only had, let's see here, let me find it. She had 6 kills in that match. So again, Kentucky didn't go to her often, only had 11 attempts on that. But she's one of those that she's in there really to give you a really nice defensive boost. And if you
Mm-hmm.
get anything from her offensively, that's considered, oh, that's extra. That's like, butter on top of the biscuit, because it's just extra stuff that you're really happy with. So Kentucky has an interesting kind of dichotomy with those. The right sides, you mentioned it, they don't usually get as many swings. With Reagan Rutherford, especially beginning last year, they kind of went away from that kind of
Mm-hmm.
traditional notion. She actually gets a lot of garbage balls for
Yeah.
Kentucky. They've made a very clear emphasis beginning last year. If we're out of system, send it to Reagan, because she's left-handed, because she's playing on that right pin. She can kind of do some different stuff that a lot of right sides can't do, and it really puts the other team off balance. Because if you're out of system, like you've mentioned, we're expecting it to go to the left pin, but if you shoot it behind you to Reagan and she has one blocker, she's so good that if you put one blocker against her, more often than not, you're going to get a kill. And so they've made a
Yeah.
very specific intentionality on giving her more balls. Again, in that game against Pittsburgh, she had more attempts than anybody. She had 42 swings and had 19 kills. So she's often someone that Kentucky is looking to out of system. Again, especially with Aaron and Brooklyn kind of struggling a little bit the way they have been. Kentucky is going to her very often. Again, when you look at Brooklyn DeLay and Aaron Lamb, most recent match, both of them hit in the negative 100. So again, you're talking about you want to hit anywhere from 250 to 300 and that be a good kind of average. They weren't even close. And when you look at
Yeah.
how many kills they each got, Brooklyn gave you 5, Aaron gave you 4. So between two left sides, you didn't even get double-digit kills. Again, that's where
Yeah.
you're looking at, can your hitters learn how to tool the block a little bit better? Can they learn how to use the defender rather than hitting into it or hitting long or hitting out of bounds? That's something to watch for, again, as you head into this weekend, where playing multiple matches in 2 days, they're going to get a lot of swings. Reagan's going to get a lot of swings. Can you keep your errors down? I think that's the biggest thing going into this weekend. Can Kentucky find a way to beat teams if they just play clean? How good can this team be if they just play within themselves? Again, we saw in that Western exhibition match, Kentucky's got some talent. They've got some depth. They've got the offensive capability. It's all there. They still have one of the best setters in the country. They still have one of the best liberos, I believe, in the country. They still have some really phenomenal hitters on both pins and in the middle. Like that, the talent is there. It's not a question of the talent. It's a matter of, let's see if this team can go in and play clean from behind the service line and play clean from a hitting standpoint, and let's see how good they can be. And I think if they're able to do those things, I wouldn't be surprised to see them come out of the weekend undefeated. Now, if they go on this weekend and they play the way they did against Pittsburgh and they have all these errors, I wouldn't be surprised to see them come out still no wins this weekend. Like,
Yeah.
it's a very careful balance that Kentucky is dealing with right now, because if you have 44 errors in a match again, you're not going to beat very many teams. You are gifting almost 2 sets worth of points to a team that, if they're ranked, especially if they're ranked, there is so little room for error that you just cannot do that. Well, Leah, I think that about wraps this thing up. Great ace in it again. Next week we'll try and give you all some those defensive specialists. We'll
Mm-hmm.
break those down. What's normal for them? Go with the setter. We got to give Emma some love, and give Eleanor and Molly, the defensive specialists, some love. So we'll make sure we do that
Definitely.
for you next week. But Kentucky plays again. They'll play Houston tomorrow. I think that match is at 4, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
remembering correctly.
Yep.
And then they will play, depending upon if they win or lose tomorrow. They will either play in the morning Saturday morning, or they'll play in the evening Saturday night. And again, the opponent also is up in the air depending upon which team wins out of those two. So Saturday's match is up in the air. Stay tuned on Twitter. I'll tweet out, depending on the result, who they've got, and what time you can expect first serve and all that stuff. But big weekend this weekend, and then obviously Louisville coming up on Wednesday. maybe we can try and drop an episode early. We'll see if we can get a preview in beforehand. See if we can get a coach or a player on, talk about the Louisville game. Hopefully they'll have good news after this upcoming weekend. Hopefully they'll be in a good mood. They'll be excited.
Yeah.
Hey, they didn't not come on tonight because they lost last weekend. They're practicing right now. That's why no
Very
one was
true.
on. I don't want you all to think they avoided us. That wasn't why. They're practicing right now. But hopefully they'll be on next weekend with some good news and some high morale. But big matches this weekend, big match next Wednesday. If you are in the Kentucky area, make sure you make it to Louisville. They're playing at the Yum Center this year, which Kentucky hasn't played Louisville Yum Center in a while. I haven't seen it. Did you ever play
I
at the Yum
played
Center?
my freshman year.
Okay, so it's been a while. It's been, what is that, 8, 9 years? And then that was...
Only 7.
Is it 7? Oh, sorry, I'm aging you, Leah. I'm sorry. I'm 2 years older than you, so I'm in my brain. That's my fault.
It's only 7. I'm not that
well, there.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
It's coming. It's coming before you know it. Well, they'll be playing at the Yum Center next Wednesday, so get your tickets. I think Louisville dropped the link to them yesterday on their Twitter page, so you all can go ahead and get tickets to the Yum Center. It's going to be a great match. Again, watching 2 of the best teams in the country battle it out is always fun, especially when it's rivalry games. So if you can make it, make sure you get to the Yum Center. It's going to be a fun night. Well, thank you again, Leah, for joining me. Thank all of you guys for joining us. We'll be back next week. We'll kind of give you an update on when we're going to be recording next week. It might still be just on Thursday, but we'll see if we can find a way to release an episode early or not. But otherwise, thank you all again so much for joining us, and we will see you guys next week.